Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands, a podcast where we bridge the gap between academics and practical marketing. Every week, we sit down and go deep behind the science of some of America's most successful brands. I'm MichaelAaron Flicker,
And I'm Richard Shotton.
and today we're continuing our mini series, which we're calling Behavioral Science for Agencies. And specifically, we're diving into the agency pitch process. Let's get into it. But before we get into today's episode, Richard and I wanted to share something we've been working on for almost 2 years.
Yes, the 30th September 2025 is a very big day. It's when we launch Hacking the Human Mind.
It's a book that dives into 17 brands, just like what we cover here on the podcast, and unpacks over 30, almost 35 behavioral science principles.
And we wrote it to be very practical, insightful, and hopefully enjoyable to read. Robert Cialdini has said he couldn't put it down.
And Rory Sutherland, a guest on our podcast, called it a book for the ages. You can order it on Amazon, just search Hacking the Human Mind, or find it wherever books are sold from September 30th. So, Richard, we started this mini series called Behavioral Science for Agencies in episode 72 with media planning. And we have a plan to do 4 of these in total. This episode is all about the agency pitch process. We're going to do 2 more on strategy and on copywriting to try to hit the major areas that we think within agency life, behavioral science has like a very clear and discernible impact on what folks working in those fields can use. And pitching was an easy topic for you and I to think about because if you've ever worked in an agency, you know pitch day is our version of the Super Bowl. Tons of preparation, lots of hard work, lots of fast last minute work in a lot of cases to get in the room and be successful at a pitch. So on the one side, the agencies have a lot at stake. It's a very high pressure situation. And on the other side, for marketers, it's really a very rare and beautiful thing to bring so many different agencies together to hear how they would solve the business problems that the marketer has. And it's really a very exciting moment because agencies push themselves after weeks or months of planning and prep to boil everything down to, let's just say, an hour of a live meeting in the room. And so in that situation, it's not always the best idea that wins. It's the one that's remembered. It's the one that's felt. It's the one that people trust that often gets extra credit. Because if the pitch is set up right, all the ideas that the marketers hear in those pitch days should be excellent ideas. And often in marketing, there's multiple routes to get to a great answer. So there's got to be something else tipping the scales. And that's really what you and I wanted to focus on today. We wanted to think about the behavioral science principles that agencies can lean on to help their work stand out and to really make a difference in the minds of the marketers that they're pitching. And while Richard and I can't help you through this podcast on the substance of the ideas you might bring to the table, we can help you think about how to get that edge that really matters. Richard, you've been involved in a bunch of pitches in your past life.
And even one of you. So it's, as you say, it's a stressful experience, and there's an awful lot of work that goes into them. And I think it's that level of work that the best communicators can turn to their advantage. So one of the first biases that I think agencies should consider is what's known as the illusion of effort. So this is the idea that the work you put in front of a client will not just be judged by the inherent quality of that work. It will also be judged and judged more favorably if the client thinks lots of work's got into it. So the idea here is the same bit of work can be made more appealing if you are transparent about the effort that's gone into it. Now, the original work, the original research into this idea was done by Andrea Morales at the University of Southern California back, I think, in 2005. And she did quite a simple setup in which she worked with people who were in market for a house, and she shows them a list of 10 houses that meet their requirements. And sometimes she told those participants that the real estate agent had gone to lots of effort. They had spent 9 hours generating this list. They'd done it manually. Other times, she tells people that the real estate agent had gone to minimal effort. They'd used a computer and it had taken an hour to generate the list. And when Morales later questions the participants as to their attitude towards the real estate agent, what kind of level of quality of service do they think they'd received, she saw a very clear pattern. The people that were in the high effort condition, they rated the estate agent at 68 out of 100, whereas the people in the low effort condition, that was just 50 out of 100. So there is this 36% improvement in ratings for exactly the same product. That's the key bit to remember. For exactly the same products, if people think lots of effort's gone into it. Now,
Please. When we saw this study, we said, man, there's just so much fertile area that we can use to apply this to the pitch process. Some examples would be,
so I think the point here is if you just reveal your final work in a grand flash and take people straight to the final result, it's going to get a reasonable response as long as it's a good bit of work. But the Morales suggestion is that what you should do is take people on a journey. What are the iterations you went through? What was the expertise you drew on? What was the research you put into it? The more you stress these stories of effort, exactly the same bit of work will be rated higher.
and I think there's some literal applications, like saying, we went and talked to this many people. We did, we had this many team members work on it. We've been burning the midnight oil for this many hours to get ready for the presentation. That would be like a literal application of this study. But there's a lot more lateral applications where you can imply the effort through who's in the room, or showing this storytelling that weaves in the effort through the pitch process, that can be a little bit maybe less on the nose, but still make sure that the marketers that are receiving the pitch understand that there was real effort put in.
I mean, I would always argue that if an audience comes to their own conclusion about, let's say in this case, effort levels, but it could be many a bias. If they come to their own conclusion, it's more powerful than you directly telling them, because there's always skepticism in a pitch process towards what an agency says, because an agency's they're desperate to win the business. But if people think if people think they've come to their own conclusion about effort levels, well, who do they trust more than themselves? So you're absolutely right. I think with any of these biases we talk about, there are explicit ways you can communicate the principle, but often it's the implicit ones that are most powerful.
Yeah. And when you think about the pitch process, we're pitching humans. So we believe that whether you're, regardless of category, if the ultimate decision maker is a human, then this type of bias will apply. Whether it's a consumer-based product, a B2B product, or anything in between.
Yeah, I think that's right. The people might be a bit skeptical of this study because it was done on a slightly weird setting or unique setting of
Yeah,
buying a
unique.
house. It's not the most common good that advertisers are trying to sell, but you can see a really wide range of settings where this bias works. So, study you and I did back 2022.
Hmm.
We wanted to see whether this worked in a broader drinks category. So we recruited 178 people and we showed them an image of a fictitious vodka brand. So it's a bottle of vodka with this beautiful label for
Black
brands.
sheep vodka, Richard.
Indeed,
Black sheep
absolutely.
vodka.
Black sheep
Yeah.
vodka. And some people were asked just to rate the quality of the design. Others were asked that same question, but just before we asked them to rate the quality of the design, they were told that the design agency went through 143 iterations to get to this product design. And what we found was that there was a 34% improvement in quality ratings. So you got people going from 17% liking the design to 23%. Again, it's exactly the same product, but you see a markedly different response if people know the effort that's gone on behind it.
You and I have talked outside of the show about how this knowledge really informs so much of how we might handle artificial intelligence entering the marketing space, entering our work. A legitimate question someone in a pitch might ask is, well, how much effort did you put in? How much AI did you use? They might rightly ask, how much of this was the work of the team in the room and how much of this was AI? We expect you to use AI. Um, and this illusion of effort really gives us an entryway to start to respond to that question.
Yes, because there's already work. Even though AI hasn't been around that long, there are already experiments from psychologists that suggests products created by AI fall foul of the illusion of effort because people assume AI generated product equals low effort product. So there's a famous study by Kobe Millett at VR University in Amsterdam where he shows people images of a poster. And sometimes he says this poster is designed by an AI robot, sometimes it's been drawn by a human. And what he shows is that on all sorts of metrics from creativity, artistry, purchase intent, the poster that was supposedly generated by a human is rated as much better. For purchase intent, it's not a small difference. The purchase intent for the hand-drawn poster, 61% higher than the AI generated poster. And Millett's
Yeah.
argument is most of people's experience, our experience is AI equals low effort. You go to ChatGPT and you ask it a question and it spits out a very comprehensive answer in seconds. And we assume that because it's been done quickly, it is therefore lower quality. That's exactly the argument of the illusion of effort. So the implication for the creative agency is, of course, you need to use AI. We've got to keep pace with modern technological developments. But if you speed up the production of a process or you incorporate AI and do nothing else, be prepared for your work to be judged as worse quality. What you need to do as an agency is draw attention to all the effort that went into setting up the processes and protocols that got you into the position that you could then churn out an answer very, very quickly. So you still need to show effort. And when AI is involved, you move from talking about the speed of delivery to talking about how much effort went into getting those systems set up.
Yeah, and other angles that agencies consider that come to mind are we have a more robust team of experts that have validated the output of AI. So you can do the illusion of effort to get the systems ready to go into AI. We sourced more data. We had more quality that went into the machine. Or you could look at we had a panel of 24 experts review it on the way out. Or we have a team of prompt engineers who know how to get more out of AI than a normal person could. Lots of ways you could show your expertise on top of getting the benefit of using this new technology.
And that's the same, I think, with all these biases, that the academic has found an insight into human nature. So in this case, it's people use effort as a proxy for quality, and AI is associated with low effort. That is a description of human nature. Once you know that, well, then there are lots of different ways in which you can
That's
try
right.
and circumvent it. I think never feel, if you're as a practitioner, that you have to stick, you know, rigorously and laboriously to the exact use in the experiment. I think you've got to use your creativity in interpreting and harnessing these ideas.
That's why this is such a fruitful field. It's why it's such an interesting topic because it's actually the starting spot. It's not the recommendation. It's the starting spot to then go and test and learn on your own.
Yeah, I feel that I feel like I'm like rehashing. I'm sure it was an ad for like a game. I think it was called Othello. It was something like, it takes seconds to learn and then a lifetime to master. And behavioral science is a bit like that. The experiments are simple. You can often explain them in 5 minutes, but then getting the most out of those experiments, we could come back in 50 years and there'd still be things for us both to learn.
Yeah, we've said that many times before. It's because the insights are based in evolutionary biology, long, long lineage of why we believe the things we believe, that we act the way we act, that's more system one style emotional response rather than rational reactions. And that's why our field of marketing has so much to do with this, because so you know the underlying bias, what do you do with it? That's really very exciting. So we have our first behavioral science principle we just hit on. Let's move to a second one that we think would really be helpful for agencies in the pitch process.
Okay, so this one might be a bit more contentious. I think the illusion of effort, hopefully everyone agrees with, everyone's going to apply that. The second bias is what's known as the stolen thunder effect. So we've quite regularly talked about the pratfall effect, which is it's kind of related. So pratfall effects, Elliot Aronson, wonderful study, 1966, he shows that people who admit a flaw, who exhibit a flaw, they become more appealing. Now, I think that's interesting, but for the pitch process, the more relevant bias is the stolen thunder effect, which is essentially if you admit a flaw or a problem with the agency or the argument, the believability of all your other claims goes up. And that, I think, is something that more agencies could harness. Agencies often pretend everything is perfect, that there are no trade-offs with either them as a company or with their idea. But that's not realistic. What you really want to be doing is identifying a genuine doubt about your agency that the competitors will probably bring up anyway, proactively bring that up with the client and then explain it away. Now, that might feel like a risk, but actually there is some really solid evidence that backs this up as an approach. So the study in question is a 1993 study. It comes from Kip Williams at the University of Toledo. And he did this experiment with people who were looking at a kind of a jury style thought experiment. So he recruits this group, splits them into 3 groups, and you get the first group who read about a defense argument and then a prosecution's response. And the first set of people hear a very strong defense argument and then the prosecution's attack. And he asks people on a 7-point scale how guilty those people are.
Mhm.
And the average score is 5.04. So this is the kind of control, the base. Then he tests 2 alternatives. And this is the kind of interesting bit. So on one alternative, people read the defense case. It's the same as last time. Then they hear the prosecution case, and then the prosecution case, new this time, they identify a really damaging fact about the defense that they didn't mention. And the guilt level in this 7-point scale amongst the readers jumps to 6.61. So far so obvious. If the prosecution uncovers like a really damaging bit of evidence, people are much more likely to find the suspect guilty. But then the third variant of this study, defense runs through exactly the same cases in the previous 2 versions, and then at the end they announce that there is a damaging bit of evidence. They tell the jurors what that damaging piece of evidence is, and they don't even try and rebut it. They just announce it. Then you hear the prosecutional attack, and they go to town on why this is such a bad bit of evidence. So it's it's the same as the previous version that we heard. Now here, the average score when the kind of readers try and guess the guilt. Remember, it's a 7-point scale. High is bad. Now they come back at 5.83. So no damaging evidence, 5.04. Damaging evidence, but the defense lawyer mentions it first, 5.83. Damaging evidence, and you leave it to the prosecution to bring it up, 6.61. So what this is showing, I know it's a bit of a complex study, but basically, if I lost people during that, what this is showing is if your audience is going to discover a damaging bit of evidence about you, it is much better for you to bring it up proactively than let other people mention it. Now, the way that Williams set up this experiment, it's kind of extreme. He gets the defense in the Stolen Thunder version mentioning there's a problem, and they don't even try and rebut it. But even when there is no rebuttal at all, it is still more likely to get their client off than if they let the prosecution bring it up. And I think that suggests there's an even bigger benefit in other circumstances. And the argument for why Williams thinks this is so powerful is most communicators have the problem that their audience doesn't believe what they say. Now, clients don't believe what agencies say in pitches because they know they have a very strong vested interest to spin the truth. But if you admit there's a problem, that tangibly proves your honesty, and then everything else is a bit more believable. So what you want to do as an agency is think, are there any flaws to my business that the potential client is going to realize or the competitor is going to bring up? Like maybe we are not as big as one of the people we're competing against. Something that's going, or we don't have experience in this particular category. Something that is bound to be noticed by the client or brought up by the competitors. If you can successfully identify that, the Kipling-Williams study says you should mention it. And what I would say, if you want to push it even further, mention it and then try and rebut it. And then I think you're on something quite powerful.
And in that way, it's, as you said earlier, it's like the pratfall effect, that if you can get ahead of it, then it makes everything more believable. And like the pratfall effect, if you can choose, because if you can choose a flaw that you can then make a positive outcome of, you're even in better shape. So admitting the flaw makes you more believable, and if you can then bring them along a story that makes that more believable, and they can see the benefit of it, that small flaw actually has a benefit that they can then weigh their hat on, put their trust in. It can be very effective.
Absolutely. So we've got these kind of two related biases. In my mind, I always think stolen thunder is you admit a flaw proactively and you become more believable. Pratfall effect, you admit a flaw and you become more likable. So both have value to the agency trying to win business. And then you're absolutely right. There is work by people like I think it's Gerd Bohner, German psychologist, that shows if you pick the right flaw, you can emphasize the strength. Now, what he means by that is, let's say you are an agency who has premium pricing. You know you're going to be more expensive than competitors. That's kind of your business model. The Stolen Thunder effect would say, lean into it. Tell people you're a bit more expensive, and then everything else you say is that much more believable. The pratfall effect suggests it will make you more likable. And for that particular flaw, if you then try it back to you being higher quality, better attentive client service, more rigorous research, more award-winning, ROI generating creative, if you can link price back to your higher quality, then you are, I think you're doing a really powerful persuasive technique.
Yeah. And if you just think about being the buyer for a second, it's so easy when you're in the agency pitch process to only think about how you want to convince them of your point, you want to showcase your points. But if you can just put yourself in the buyer's seat and think about when you've been a buyer in the past, when somebody tells you something, you confirms what you already knew as a weakness, it just lowers your guard. Like it just makes you feel more believable. There's an old study you and I have not raised recently, but I think it was around buying a used car, and we looked at it for other reasons. We looked at it for if you can make it flowery and descriptive, you can make people imagine themselves being in the used car. But if you think about a used car and someone trying to sell it to you and they admit, well, it's got a lot of miles on it, but here's why that would be a positive thing. It just lowers your defensiveness over it. So I just think that there's the behavioral science side, and if you all as listeners can connect to the same human emotion you felt as a buyer, you can come up with more ways to make this work.
Yeah, and I think it requires people to be quite honest about their strengths and weaknesses as a business, which is tough. But maybe what people could do is get external opinions. Maybe in some of those early, we call them tissue meetings. Is that the same thing with in America?
We have a tissue session where
Yeah. Okay.
you're
Fine. Yeah.
like
Tissue
throwing
sessions,
up
isn't it?
ideas. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even exploring what some of those negatives might be in the client's mind, because once you know that, you've got a massive opportunity.
And depending, at least in the American pitch process, it is not uncommon to ask for their scorecard after the first phase. And many brands are happy to share it. Here's why we think here we've advanced your agency to the next round. Here are the positives that we saw and why we advanced you. And here is what we're looking out for as concerns. They're
Yeah.
giving you the first step. Now you could decide if those are the ones you want to highlight or if there might be something else. But at least in modern pitches that agencies I own are part of, the search consultants will be happy to share that with you because they want to help you make the best case you can and their client make the best decision they can make.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that uh, getting that information, seeing search consultants as your friend rather than just an enemy, I think those are great things to take on board.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always, if you can remember in the pitch, you want to be the agency they choose so long as it's a great decision for your agency as well. We do, as agencies, we do not need to win at all costs. We need to also be winning business that we as agencies can do a great job at. So there is a little bit of discernment that's required there. Okay, so we've talked about two really substantial behavioral sciences biases. We have one more that we thought we would bring to the table for today.
And this is a bit of a different angle. So very much illusion of effort and stolen thunder effect are principles you can use in the initial meetings, the pitch itself, when you're trying to persuade a client that you are the best candidate. Once you've hopefully got to the final two people or the final person in the process, well, then the discussions turn to money. And I think one principle that people could apply is this idea of extremeness aversion. So when you're putting your pricing together. So the original study is a real classic, 1993, Amos Tversky, and I think it was Simonson was his research partner, get together with a group of people. They show them two cameras. I think one was $169 and one was $239. You've got a basic camera and then a fancy camera. So the fancy camera has more features, and you get an exact 50-50 split in the audience's preference for those cameras. So when people are asked, which would you pick? 50-50 split. They then get a completely fresh group of people. They show them the same two cameras, $169, $239, with more features, and then a super premium camera with loads of features for $469. Now, not many people want that super premium camera. I think it's 21%, I think, pick the super premium camera. But what we should be interested in is what happens to those original two cameras. Because remember, they're exactly the same cost, same benefits. It was a 1-to-1 ratio of preference. Now it goes 1-to-3. So it's 22% want the basic camera, 57% want what is now the middle camera. So this is an example of what the psychologists call the center stage effect or extremeness aversion. And it's the idea that when people are picking products, they are not just interested in the inherent benefits of that product versus the price. Of course, those two things are important, but they are also interested in what those products are being compared to. So if you are ever putting a pricing proposal together, don't give people one cost. Give them three prices, a pared back option, what you actually want to sell, and then a super premium version. Because what that super premium version does, maybe with a bigger account team, more creatives, more experienced managerial oversight, what that super premium offering does is change how people relate to the middle thing that you're actually trying to sell. Go back to the camera example. If you just see a $169 camera and a $239 camera, the $239 camera looks like a $70 excessive cost.
Premium. Yeah.
Exactly. You introduce the $469 version, and suddenly it looks like a $230 saving to buy the $239 camera. $230 saving. You know,
Yep.
we judge things relatively, not absolutely. That works in consumer goods like cameras. But I did some research this year with Transmission and Newton X. We did it amongst business-to-business buyers, and we showed this effect was just the same in a business setting. If anything, there was a more extreme result.
And so maybe two big builds on what we're talking about here. Number one,
Number one
uh,
should be, if we're going to explain this bloody study again, we should have some pictures.
we will put them in the show notes. You can flip along as we go. Uh, Number one is there is a ethical, practical build that you want your top option while it is acting as a price anchor and a comparative point for the middle and low option to be something that when you deliver it will add that much more value because you will have a case where somebody chooses it and you do not want it to be so extreme that you can't deliver those services or that you can't get to an even better outcome for the clients because hopefully that you do sell in some of that top item. So don't make it just a throwaway price, but make it a price that is equated to the value that then makes the other two feel more reasonable. You want to add to that?
Yeah, no. I basically to agree. I think you know, let's say its main role is that kind of positive relative perception.
Yep.
Absolutely, you still want it to, if bought, you should be happy as well. And there
100%.
will be some circumstances, and I've often found this with, like, let's say it's a brand who is going through a tough time. You know, this is a absolute make or break campaign. Often they want to buy the most expensive option. They want the all singing, all dancing, package, because there is this idea in people's heads, sometimes proportionality bias, that the bigger the problem, the bigger the solution should be. So I think you're absolutely right. Yes, I've approached this very much about price relativity and anchoring, but absolutely have a package that if you sell it, you can certainly deliver and then will be to everyone's benefit.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, always we just we make these points, and then the mirror of that is even if it doesn't get chosen very often, don't lose faith that it's helping better sell in the middle option. So just because you won't sell a lot of the $400 plus cameras
Yeah,
doesn't mean
yeah,
it's not acting exactly as it's designed, which is to improve the likelihood that the middle
exactly.
option is chosen. So it both ways. Make sure you want to sell the premium option and it adds real value that is a fair deal for the buyer, and don't get rid of it if it doesn't shoot if it
Yeah.
doesn't get chosen more
And do you
frequently.
know what? You comparing it to the cameras again made me think that I think there's an added benefit for agencies, but basically anyone that's selling a service to use this principle, which is especially in those early days, it's quite hard to have a conversation about trade-offs. If you, as a client, beat us down on our rates, well, maybe we're going to have to cut some corners in the quality of the service. If you've given people three plans, it's blindingly obvious that if you pick the silver package, bronze, silver, gold, the middle package, the silver package, you have actively as a client avoided the super premium one. And so I think if anything ever goes wrong, it also gives you a little bit of acceptance. The client will accept to a degree they did trade down, and that did have to come with some consequences in terms of the level of service. So it helps broach some of those, I think, discussions that otherwise are a little bit more awkward to have.
Uh, in in our experiences in the agencies we own, it also sets you up for when you go over scope to say, well, there was a plan for that. We actually had an option, and so let's pick something from that higher plan and bring it in. But that you have some pricing benchmarks already established. And if there ever are under scope and there's a reason they can't use it. It gives you a floor as well because you've established two ends of the spectrum. So I think it's helpful as you say, in getting through those awkward conversations and in helping keep within scope management in the future.
Brilliant. Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
So let's wrap up, Richard, and say what were the three major things that we shared in today's episode?
So, three broad areas we talked about: the illusion of effort. This is the idea that exactly the same product, so a creative idea, for example, will be rated differently if people think lots of effort has gone into it. So we
Mhm.
use effort as a proxy for quality. So your role as a agency is to make sure the client is aware, explicitly or implicitly, of the huge amount of work that's gone into the end product, because that will change their judgments. That was the first principle. The second principle was the stolen thunder effect. And I did realise in retrospect we picked two studies which were quite complicated and definitely need some visual aids. The stolen thunder effect at its most basic is if your potential client will be aware of a flaw with your argument or with the agency itself. Maybe you're expensive, maybe you have limited geographical coverage. It is better to raise that yourself than the client to be aware of it and you not mention it, or for one of your competitors to raise it. You bring it up proactively, even in very extreme circumstances. You don't even try and rebut the problem. You will benefit because all your other claims will be seen as more believable afterwards. So I love this because it's all about the power of honesty. Don't try and hide things. Be open. If you pick the right flaws you mentioned, you can kind of get a double benefit. And then the third study we talked about, again, we need some visual aids in there. We'll put these in the show notes. This is the idea of extremeness aversion. This is the idea that prices are not judged on an absolute level. People do not, like fully rational computers, weigh up benefits versus cost. They're always looking for comparisons. You can use that to your benefit. And we're very much talking about agencies, but clients could do this as well. Think about giving people a three-tiered price structure. The high price option is mainly there to make the other two look better value. As you said, you want to make sure that you can actually deliver on that and it's a fair and strong offering. But always give people more than one price option. The additional numbers are meant to make what you actually want to sell look a bit better value in comparison. So three great studies, I think, today.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you for wrapping it up. So as we come to a close today, we always like to end with a fun final thought. Do you have a thing, Richard, that you always do when you pitch? Is it a ritual? Is it a practice? Is there something you always do when you were a part of pitches of the past?
Turn up about 3 hours early. That was my main thing. Uh, I'm 49, but when it comes to timings, I do behave like I'm 69, and I'm completely paranoid about things going wrong. So I would turn up so early to the client office or our office if we were doing it at our place. I pretty much. Even if I'd broken a leg on the way in, I'd probably been able to crawl in on time. So I think that was the. I'm not sure if it's a ritual, but that was my MO. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
And you?
And
Any
at
any
our
uh, any rituals?
yeah, I would say at our companies, we have a ritual of always celebrating after the pitch. Whether you win or you lose, whether you think it went great or it didn't go well, there was a ton of work that went into it. So a dinner together, a shared a drink or dessert together before everybody goes on their ways and is back to all the other responsibilities we have. It's not in preparation for the pitch, but it's a really nice team building thing to do after the pitch, when a lot of energy and a lot of effort's gone on.
Yeah, I like that because I think it decouples the result and the effort that went into the pitch. Because if you just reward people on the result, it's a little bit unfair because sometimes there's an element of randomness. There's an element that's out of your control. You can do, I think, a great pitch and get the wrong result, or a mediocre one and get the right result. So sometimes I think rewarding people for the effort and the quality of the product is a great idea rather than just the result.
Yeah, I had not thought about it that way, but in fact, most of it is out of your control. You could do the best job that you can, but if the pitch team is hearing great ideas from lots of really smart agencies, then there's almost most of it is out of your control, and that's part of the design
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for listening today. If you found the episode interesting, helpful, please follow us on our streaming channels, connect with us on LinkedIn, and always share this podcast with anyone who you think would benefit from hearing it. And until next time, I'm MichaelAaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.
Thanks for tuning in.
Behavioral Science for Brands is brought to you by Method One. Recognized as one of the fastest growing companies in America for the third year in a row, featured on Inc.'s 5,000 list. Method One is a proudly independent creative and media agency grounded in behavioral science. They exist to make brands irresistible, helping people discover products, services, and experiences that bring moments of joy to their lives. As behavior change experts, Method One creates emotional connections that drive true brand value for their clients, focusing primarily with indulgence brands in the CPG space. Find out more at methodone.com.